lens reflex cameras really became popular in the 1970s, and in the 80s they began to be more automative. You got far more exposure systems and the automatic focusing became extremely popular and it began to work well. By the 90s, we still saw manufacturers being very individual in their design responses. For example, a Minolta camera looked quite different to a Pentax, which looked different to a Olympus and again different to a Nikon. What was interesting in the mid-90s, the cameras began to be more similar in design, and the camera I'm going to talk about today very much echoed that development. The camera I'm talking about is the Nikon F60. The camera before the F60 was called the F50, and that had quite a few design features, and I've made a video about that in the past that I hope you will watch. The F60 was a similar size and it's quite a lot bigger than what came after it, which is the F75. The F75 is quite a small camera. This is a large camera, however it is a plastic body. What we have here, the bit of the design which became more similar was this circular selector, which we have a manual, aperture, a shutter priority and a program priority and a green. If we look at Canon and Pentax cameras at the same time, we see a very similar move towards this design. We have a LED screen here with information about the exposure, the number of exposures, the battery condition, etc. We have an on-off switch. What is slightly different about this camera, which I quite like, is that though we have here at the back a control, a selector for shutter speed, if we want to change our aperture, we simply, instead of having a button which came later here, we do have a little button at the front here which is in the design of an aperture, and we simply press that and that will just change the aperture when we are in aperture mode. We do have a self timer. To switch between the automatic focusing and the manual focusing, we have a switch on the front here which is slightly different to having the switch on the lens, which you will see in the Canon camera. One slightly strange thing about the F60 is it won't accept the automatic focus, the AF lenses of previous Nikon cameras. It has got the classic F mount, but as I said, it will not accept the previous lenses on the focusing, which is a bit of a shame. And I have found this particular model a little bit fussy about its lens, and I find that it much prefers to be in manual. The F75 I have had no trouble with at all. We've got a nice on-off switch here. The camera is very easy to load. We simply put the film in here and load it over here. It has DX coding, so we don't have to set the ISO, and I think that is about it. As I said, it fits very nicely into the hand. Oh, we do have a diopter for the eye control, which you don't get on other cameras, so that's quite a nice feature. This camera was very much aimed at the lower market. Having said that, it's got lots of controls on, and I think it's, you know, for any photographer, it is a very practical camera. Let's see how I got on when I took it out on a photo trip. The first photo is taken just outside Corfe Castle in Dorset. It was a very gloomy Sunday afternoon. We've had rain almost all day and it really was quite miserable. And in the distance we can just see this castle, which is called Corfe Castle. Corfe meaning gap in the hill, and Corfe Castle is a very pretty Dorset village, and I was looking forward to seeing how the F60 performed, and I was pleasantly surprised. We've got a good range of tones. Now remember, the weather is really dull and the lens is having to cope with these really quite nasty conditions. The range of tones was good. The focusing was very clear on the camera. It's a nice camera to hold. It fits into the hand very easily. It's quite a large camera compared to what came after in the F65. The F75. It is a large camera, and it does feel a bit plastically. Corfe, as I said, is this fantastic little village, but it does suffer from traffic coming right through. It's very picturesque. In fact, the pub you see here, called the Greyhound, is one of the most photographed pubs in the UK. And fascinatingly enough, there's a number of pubs in this village. Here we see the Banks Arms, because it was the Banks family that originally owned Corfe Castle for about 300 years. And it's a very pretty place to photograph. Good to test cameras because there's a good variety of buildings, and it's a good spot. Now what I'm missing here is I'm not actually photographing what most people do photograph here, and it's coming later. Here we are, the castle. You see, that is why the pub is so well known, because of the castle in the background. Again, I'm really pleased with how this camera is performing, but it did do something slightly odd. The information in the viewfinder wasn't always the same as the information on the LCD. Now, I go back to this problem with the lenses and the F60. My theory is the lens I'm actually using is from a F75, a slightly later camera, and I just wonder if the lens which was developed with this camera is just slightly different. I might be completely wrong, and it would be interesting to know how other people have got on with this camera, the F60. As I said, the S65 even is slightly different to this camera. It's slightly smaller, and it's interesting, the name is slightly smaller in its font. The whole body is smaller, in fact. So, in conclusion, and again, we end this selection of photographs with another one of the castle and the Greyhound. And as I said, I was using a 100 ASO film, which it was a former pound film, which I developed in ID11. Diluted 1:1, which I think gives us just slightly finer print. And there's the camera, the F60. I enjoyed using it, but as I said, did have lens issues. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.